Behind the golden gates of Westminster Abbey, history was about to unfold in the most spectacular way imaginable. But for Prince William and Catherine, this wasn't just another royal ceremony. It was the day their children would witness their grandfather become king, and everything had to be perfect. As the morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones, three young royals were about to experience the weight of centuries-old tradition, while their parents navigated the delicate balance between duty and family. What seemed like a flawless royal moment would soon reveal the beautiful chaos that exists when childhood innocence meets the grandest stage in the world. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting dancing shadows across the nursery floor where Prince George sat cross-legged, his small fingers fumbling with the buttons of his formal military-style jacket. The 8-year-old's brow was furrowed in concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he struggled with the ornate golden fastenings that seemed designed more for adult fingers than his own. "Mummy, these buttons hate me," George announced with the dramatic flair that only children possess, his shoulders slumping in defeat as yet another button slipped through his grasp. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, appeared in the doorway, her own preparation momentarily forgotten as she took in the sight of her eldest son's battle with his ceremonial attire. She was already dressed in an elegant navy blue coat dress, her hair styled in an intricate updo that would later be crowned with a delicate tiara, but her maternal instincts overrode any concern for her own appearance. "They don't hate you, darling," she said softly, kneeling beside him on the plush carpet. "They're just very special buttons that need a gentle touch. Like this." Her fingers moved with practiced ease, securing each button while George watched intently, as if memorizing the technique for future reference. Down the hallway, Princess Charlotte was engaged in her own preparation ritual, standing before a full-length mirror in her pristine white dress, complete with a small navy sash that matched her mother's ensemble. At 7 years old, she had already developed an appreciation for fashion that rivaled some adults, turning this way and that to ensure every fold fell perfectly. "Papa, does my hair look like Mummy's?" Charlotte asked as Prince William entered her room, his own formal military uniform already perfectly pressed and adorned with the various medals and honors that spoke to his years of service and preparation for his future role. William paused, studying his daughter's carefully braided hair with the seriousness of a royal protocol officer. "It looks absolutely perfect, Princess Charlotte," he said, using her full title in the playful way that always made her giggle. "But I think it might look even more beautiful with this." From behind his back, he produced a small jewelry box containing a delicate gold bracelet, a family heirloom that had once belonged to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. Charlotte's eyes widened as he fastened it around her tiny wrist, the weight of history suddenly, tangible in the form of precious metal against her skin. In the youngest prince's room, 4-year-old Louis was proving to be the most challenging member of the family to prepare. His nanny, Maria, was engaged in what could only be described as a diplomatic negotiation over the necessity of wearing proper shoes versus his preferred choice of colorful Wellington boots. "But these have dinosaurs on them," Louis argued, pointing to the cheerful T-Rex patterns adorning his rain boots. "Grandfather likes dinosaurs too. He told me about the bones in his garden." Catherine appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of her youngest's passionate defense of his footwear choice. She exchanged a knowing look with Maria before sitting down at Louis's level, her formal dress pooling gracefully around her. "You know what, Louis? Grandfather does love hearing about dinosaurs from you," she began, her voice taking on the patient tone she reserved for these important conversations. "But today is a very special day when we all dress in our finest clothes to show how much we respect the important ceremony. Your black shoes are actually quite brave, too. They're the same kind that Papa wore when he was little." Louis considered this information seriously, his small face scrunched in concentration. "Will Papa tell me about when he wore them?" "I'm sure he will," Catherine promised, helping him into the polished black shoes while he chattered about the adventures his new footwear might have. As the family gathered in the main drawing room, the weight of the day began to settle over them like a familiar but significant blanket. This wasn't just any royal engagement. This was the coronation of King Charles III, an event that would be watched by millions around the world and remembered for generations to come. William stood by the window, gazing out at the gathering crowds that were already beginning to line the streets despite the early hour. The sight of so many people, all united in their desire to witness this historic moment, filled him with a mixture of pride and responsibility that he had come to know well over the years. "The cars will be here in 20 minutes," he announced to the room, though his eyes remained fixed on the scene below. "Are we all ready for our close-up?" George, now properly buttoned and looking every inch the young prince, straightened his shoulders in unconscious imitation of his father. "I remember what you taught me about waving, Papa. Slow and steady, like I'm painting the air." "That's exactly right," William confirmed, turning to face his family with a smile that managed to be both proud and slightly nervous. "And what do we remember about today?" "It's about Grandpapa becoming king," Charlotte chimed in, her small hand instinctively reaching for the bracelet at her wrist. "And we're there to support him, just like our family always supports each other. And if Louis gets tired, we take turns helping him," George added, displaying the protective instinct that had been growing stronger as he understood his role as the eldest sibling. Catherine moved to stand beside William, her hand finding his in a gesture that spoke to years of partnership in navigating the complexities of royal life, while maintaining their commitment to being present, engaged parents. Together, they looked at their 3 children, each unique in personality but united in their unconscious preparation for a life of service and tradition. "Your great-granny Elizabeth would be so proud of you all today," Catherine said softly, her voice carrying the weight of memory and hope. "She always said that the best part of any royal occasion was watching the family come together." The mention of the late Queen brought a moment of quiet reflection to the room. Even young Louis seemed to sense the significance, moving closer to his siblings in an instinctive gesture of unity. Outside, the sound of approaching vehicles could be heard, the careful choreography of royal transportation beginning to unfold. This was more than just a trip to Westminster Abbey. It was a journey into history, with 3 young children at its heart, each carrying forward the legacy of generations while writing their own unique chapter in the ongoing story of the British royal family. William checked his watch, a gift from his father that he wore on all significant occasions, and nodded to Catherine. The final preparations were complete, the children were ready, and the world was waiting. In just a few hours, they would all witness the transformation of a father and grandfather into a king. But for now, they were simply a family, united in love and purpose, preparing to step into the spotlight that would define not just this day, but potentially the rest of their lives. The morning sun continued to climb higher in the sky, and somewhere in the distance, the bells of Westminster Abbey began their ancient call, signaling that the time had come for history to unfold once again. The convoy of gleaming black vehicles moved through the streets of London like a carefully choreographed dance, each car precisely positioned, and timed to ensure the royal family's safe passage to Westminster Abbey. Inside the second vehicle, the Wales family sat in formation, William and Catherine flanking their 3 children, creating a protective cocoon of calm amid the extraordinary circumstances unfolding around them. George pressed his nose to the window, his breath fogging the bulletproof glass as he watched the massive crowds that lined every street, every building, every available viewing space along their route. The sight was both thrilling and overwhelming for an 8-year-old who was still learning to balance his natural curiosity with the dignified behavior expected of his position. "Look at all the flags, Mummy," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder as thousands of Union Jacks created a sea of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Are they all here for Grandpapa?" "They are indeed," Catherine replied, her own gaze following his to take in the remarkable display of support and celebration that surrounded them. "People have come from all over the world to be here today. Some of them have been waiting since yesterday evening just to get a good spot." Charlotte, ever observant, had noticed something else entirely. "Mummy, why are some people crying?" she asked, pointing to several individuals in the crowd whose faces were streaked with tears, though they were smiling and waving enthusiastically. The question touched Catherine deeply, reminding her of the profound emotional connection that existed between the royal family and the people they served. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people cry when they're very happy or when something very special is happening. Today is both of those things for many people. They're thinking about our family's history, about your great-granny who was queen for so long, and about the exciting future that lies ahead." William leaned forward slightly, catching sight of a group of children who had painted their faces with crowns and were jumping up and down with excitement as the convoy passed. "See those children there?" he pointed out to his own kids. "They're about your ages, and they're here because they believe in the same things we do, that families can work together to help make the world a better place." Louis, who had been relatively quiet during the journey, suddenly perked up as he spotted something that captured his imagination completely. "Papa, there's a dog wearing a crown," he exclaimed, his voice reaching a pitch that only pure delight could achieve. Sure enough, a small corgi, clearly chosen as a tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth's famous love for the breed, was sitting proudly beside its owner, sporting a tiny golden crown that caught the morning sunlight. The sight was so charming that even the usually composed William couldn't help but chuckle. "That dog has excellent taste in accessories," he said, which sent all three children into fits of giggles that helped ease some of the building tension as they drew closer to their destination. The driver's voice came through the intercom, professionally calm despite the magnitude of the event he was helping to facilitate. "Your Royal Highnesses, we're approaching Westminster Abbey. The crowds are particularly dense in this area, and we'll be moving more slowly for the final approach." As if summoned by his words, the crowds became even more dramatic. The ancient stones of Westminster Abbey came into view, and, with them, an unprecedented gathering of people that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The sight was breathtaking and slightly intimidating, even for adults who had spent their lives preparing for moments like this. "It's like the entire world is here," George observed, his earlier excitement now tinged with the weight of realization about just how significant this day truly was. Catherine felt her maternal instincts surge as she recognized the moment when childhood wonder began to merge with adult understanding. "You know what I think about when I see crowds like this?" she asked, drawing all three children's attention. "I think about all the families who are here together, just like us. There are grandparents who brought their grandchildren to see history happen, and parents who wanted their kids to remember this day forever." "Are we making history too?" Charlotte asked, her question revealing the perceptive nature that often surprised adults who met her. "We are indeed," William confirmed, his voice carrying the pride and slight amazement that still sometimes caught him off guard when he considered the life his children were inheriting. "But the most important thing is that we're making it together as a family. That's what gives meaning to all the ceremony and tradition, the fact that it's built on love and commitment to each other and to the people who believe in us." As they drew even closer to the Abbey, the formal protocol began to take precedence. Security personnel could be seen coordinating their movements, ensuring that every aspect of the arrival would proceed flawlessly. The children could see other members of the extended royal family arriving in their own vehicles, each contributing to the grand tapestry of the day's events. "Look, there's Aunt Anne," Charlotte pointed out, spotting the Princess Royal's distinctive figure as she emerged from her own car with characteristic efficiency and purpose. "And Uncle Edward and Aunt Sophie," George added, his familiarity with the extended family evident in his easy identification of the various relatives who were converging on this historic location. The weight of tradition was palpable now, not just in the formal clothing and careful protocol, but in the very air around them. This was Westminster Abbey, where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years, where William's own parents had been married, where his grandmother had lain in state just months before. The building held within its stones the echoes of centuries of British history, and today, his children would become part of that ongoing story. "I can see the red carpet," Lewis announced with the enthusiasm that only a 4-year-old could muster for such details. "It's really, really long." Indeed, the famous red carpet stretched from the street to the Abbey's entrance, flanked by honor guards whose uniforms were so precisely maintained they seemed to gleam in the morning light. Every detail had been planned and rehearsed countless times, yet there was still an element of anticipation and excitement that no amount of preparation could entirely capture. Catherine reached across to smooth a stray hair on George's head, her touch gentle but purposeful. "Remember, darlings, when we get out of the car, there will be many photographers and cameras. We'll walk together, and if anyone feels nervous, just look for Papa or me. We're right here with you always." The car began its final approach to the designated stopping point, and William could feel his children's energy shifting from excited anticipation to focused attention. They had been preparing for this moment in various ways throughout their lives, through smaller royal engagements and family discussions about duty and service, but nothing could quite prepare anyone for the magnitude of a coronation. "Are you ready to make Grandpapa proud?" William asked, looking at each of his children in turn. 3 small voices responded with varying degrees of confidence, but unanimous determination. "Yes, Papa." The vehicle came to a gentle stop, and outside the bulletproof windows, they could see the carefully arranged reception committee waiting to greet them. Palace staff, security personnel, and officials from Westminster Abbey all stood ready to facilitate this crucial moment in the day's proceedings. Catherine took a deep breath, her hand finding William's briefly before they prepared to step out into the spotlight that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Their children were about to experience something that very few people in the world would ever witness firsthand, and, as parents, they felt the weight of that privilege and responsibility in equal measure. The door handle turned, and history beckoned. The moment the car door opened, the world seemed to transform into something almost magical. The carefully muted sounds from inside the vehicle gave way to a symphony of voices, camera shutters, and the distant strains of ceremonial music that drifted from within Westminster Abbey. The red carpet stretched before them like a royal highway, bordered by an honor guard whose presence added both grandeur and security to the momentous occasion. William emerged first, his military uniform catching the morning light as he turned to assist Catherine from the vehicle. Her navy blue coat dress moved gracefully as she stepped onto the historic stones, and, for a moment, the couple stood together, presenting a picture of unity and purpose that would be captured by hundreds of photographers and remembered for generations to come. Then came the children, each emerging in order of age, their careful training evident in the way they instinctively positioned themselves near their parents while still maintaining the poise expected of young royals. George appeared first, his earlier nervousness having transformed into focused concentration as he took in the magnitude of the scene around him. His posture straightened unconsciously, channeling the royal bearing that was becoming more natural with each public appearance. Charlotte followed, her white dress pristine and her movements showing the natural grace that had been evident since she was a toddler. The small navy sash across her dress caught the light, creating a visual connection to her mother's ensemble that photographers would certainly note. Her eyes were bright with curiosity, taking in every detail of the scene with the observational skills that often impressed adults who interacted with her. Finally, Louis emerged, and immediately the atmosphere lightened slightly as his 4-year-old personality asserted itself despite the formal circumstances. He paused for a moment, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything around him, before reaching instinctively for his mother's hand, a gesture so natural and endearing that even the most formal protocol officers couldn't help but smile. "It's very loud," Louis whispered to Catherine, his small voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the crowd and ceremony. "It is indeed," she agreed, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "But all those sounds are people being excited and happy. Can you hear how joyful everyone sounds?" As they began their walk along the red carpet, the family moved with the synchronized precision of a group that had spent years learning to navigate public spaces together. William and Catherine flanked their children, creating a protective formation that still allowed each child to be visible to the crowd while ensuring their security and comfort. The honor guard stood at perfect attention as they passed, each soldier a testament to the military tradition that was so deeply woven into the fabric of the monarchy. George, with his fascination for military history that had been carefully nurtured by both his father and grandfather, couldn't help but notice the intricate details of their uniforms and the precision of their positioning. "Papa," he whispered as they walked, "are those the same guards who protect Grandpapa every day?" "Some of them are," William replied quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for his son to hear. "They're called the Household Division, and they've been protecting our family for hundreds of years. Today they're here to make sure everyone can celebrate safely." As they approached the great doors of Westminster Abbey, the architectural marvel that had witnessed nearly a millennium of British history revealed itself in all its Gothic splendor. The ancient stones seemed to radiate the weight of countless coronations, royal weddings, and state occasions that had taken place within its walls. Charlotte, with her artistic eye that had been encouraged through various creative pursuits, was particularly struck by the intricate carvings that adorned the entrance. "Mummy, look at all the angels in the stone," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder at the craftsmanship that had been created centuries before her birth. "Those angels have been watching over ceremonies like this for longer than we can imagine," Catherine explained, following her daughter's gaze to appreciate the medieval artistry that surrounded them. "Today, they're watching over Grandpapa's coronation, just like they watched over your great-great-great-grandmother's coronation more than 100 years ago." The concept of such continuity seemed to resonate with Charlotte, who nodded solemnly, as if accepting her place in this ancient chain of tradition and ceremony. Inside the abbey, They could hear the swelling notes of the organ and choir, a sound that seemed to emerge from the very stones themselves, creating an atmosphere that was both reverent and celebratory. The music spoke to centuries of musical tradition, each note carefully chosen to reflect the solemnity and joy of the occasion. Louis, despite his young age, seemed particularly affected by the music. His small head tilted to one side as he listened, his expression showing the kind of focused attention that music often inspired in children. "It sounds like heaven," he said suddenly, his innocent observation causing both William and Catherine to exchange a look of parental pride and amazement. "That's a beautiful way to describe it," Catherine told him, her voice warm with affection. "The people singing in there have been practicing for months, just for today, to make sure everything sounds perfect for Grandpapa." As they reached the entrance, they were greeted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, whose presence added spiritual gravitas to the proceedings. His ceremonial robes were magnificent, speaking to the religious significance of the coronation ceremony that was about to unfold within the sacred space of the abbey. "Your Royal Highnesses," the Archbishop said with a warm smile that encompassed the entire family, "welcome to this most blessed of days." The formal greeting was followed by a brief moment of informal connection as the Archbishop addressed each of the children individually, his years of experience with royal protocol evident in his ability to maintain dignity while still connecting with the youngest members of the family. "Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis," he said, his voice carrying the warmth that had made him beloved by the royal family. "Today you will witness something very special. Your grandfather is going to make promises to take care of all the people of our country, and we're all here to support him in that important work." George nodded seriously, clearly understanding the weight of what was being explained to him. Charlotte curtsied slightly, a gesture she had been practicing and which she executed with natural grace. Louis, meanwhile, seemed most interested in the Archbishop's elaborate ceremonial hat, his eyes wide with curiosity about the ornate headpiece. "Is that crown heavier than Grandpapa's?" Louis asked with the directness that only children possess, causing gentle laughter among the adults present. "It's actually called a mitre," the Archbishop explained patiently. "And it's much lighter than a crown, though it's still quite special. Would you like to know why it's shaped the way it is?" As they spoke, other members of the royal family were arriving and being greeted in similar fashion, each contributing to the gathering sense of anticipation and unity that marked such occasions. The children could see their various aunts, uncles, and cousins, all dressed in their finest ceremonial attire, all part of the same historic moment. The sound of the organ grew stronger as the great doors of the abbey began to open fully, revealing glimpses of the incredible scene within. Hundreds of guests were already seated, representatives from around the world who had come to witness this transfer of royal authority and responsibility. William placed his hand gently on George's shoulder, a gesture both protective and encouraging. "Are you ready to go inside and see Grandpapa become king?" George looked up at his father with eyes that held both excitement and the gravity of understanding that was beginning to mature within him. "Yes, Papa. I'm ready to be part of history." And, with that declaration, the Wales family stepped through the ancient doors of Westminster Abbey, into a ceremony that would bind them even more closely to centuries of tradition, while simultaneously marking the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing story of the British royal family. The interior of Westminster Abbey revealed itself like a vision from a fairy tale, but one rooted in the deepest traditions of British history. Soaring Gothic arches stretched impossibly high overhead, their ancient stones now adorned with flowers and ceremonial decorations that transformed the sacred space into something that seemed to exist between earth and heaven. Every pew was filled with representatives from around the world, kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers, dignitaries, and spiritual leaders, all gathered to witness this transfer of royal authority. The Wales family moved down the aisle with measured steps, their progress guided by centuries of protocol, yet infused with the natural warmth that had always characterized their approach to royal duty. The children walked between their parents, their eyes wide with wonder as they took in the magnitude of the spectacle surrounding them. George found himself particularly fascinated by the heraldic banners that hung from the ancient pillars, each one representing different aspects of the Commonwealth and British history. His studies with his tutors had prepared him for much of what he was seeing, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different from reading about it in books. "Look at all the colors," he whispered to Charlotte, who was equally mesmerized by the visual feast that surrounded them. Charlotte, meanwhile, had noticed something that spoke to her artistic sensibilities. The way the morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor and the faces of the assembled guests. "It's like being inside a jewel," she murmured to her mother, her poetic description earning a smile of appreciation. Louis, true to his 4-year-old nature, was most impressed by the sheer number of people present. His small head swiveled back and forth as he tried to count the endless rows of guests, his lips moving silently as he attempted to quantify what was essentially uncountable. "So many people," he said with the wonder that only a child could bring to such observations. "Do they all know Grandpapa?" "Some of them do," William explained quietly as they continued their procession. "And others have come because they represent their countries, who all want to show respect for our family and our nation. It's like the whole world is here to celebrate with us." As they approached their designated seats in the front section of the abbey, the children could see their grandfather, King Charles III, seated on the ancient coronation chair. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention, not just because of his position, but because of the dignity and gravitas he brought to this moment that he had been preparing for his entire life. "He looks like a real king," Charlotte observed, her voice filled with the kind of straightforward honesty that children excel at. "He is a real king," George corrected her gently, though his tone carried affection rather than criticism. "He became king when Great-Granny died. Today is when everyone promises to help him be the best king he can be." Their seats offered a perfect view of the ceremony, and, as they settled into position, Catherine took a moment to ensure each child was comfortable and properly positioned. The ancient wooden pews had been softened with cushions, a small concession to comfort that would be appreciated during the lengthy ceremony ahead. "Remember," she whispered to all 3 children, "this ceremony is very long, but it's broken into different parts, like acts in a play. If you need anything, just touch my hand quietly, and we'll take care of it." The organ music swelled as the formal ceremony began, and the Archbishop of Canterbury's voice filled the vast space with words that had been spoken at coronations for centuries. The children listened with varying degrees of comprehension, but all seemed to sense the profound significance of what they were witnessing. George, with his growing understanding of constitutional monarchy, recognized many of the ceremonial elements that his tutors had explained to him. When the crown jewels were presented, he sat up straighter, understanding that these weren't merely valuable objects, but symbols of the responsibility his grandfather was accepting on behalf of the nation. Charlotte found herself particularly moved by the choir, whose voices seemed to make the very stones of the abbey resonate with celestial harmony. Her own love of music, carefully nurtured through piano lessons and family singing sessions, gave her an appreciation for the skill and preparation that had gone into creating this sonic backdrop for history. "They sound like angels," she whispered to her mother, unconsciously echoing Louis's earlier observation about the music they had heard from outside. Louis, despite his young age, seemed to understand that something very important was happening. His usual restless energy was replaced by an unusual stillness as he watched his grandfather participate in rituals that connected the present moment to centuries of royal tradition. When the moment came for the actual crowning, the entire abbey fell into a reverent silence that seemed to amplify the significance of what was occurring. The Archbishop lifted St. Edward's crown, a masterpiece of goldsmith's art that had crowned monarchs for generations, and, slowly, ceremoniously, placed it upon King Charles III's head. "Now he's really the king," Louis whispered, his small voice carrying clearly enough in the silence that several nearby guests couldn't help but smile at his innocent observation. The moment was profound in its simplicity and complexity simultaneously. Here was a father and grandfather being transformed by ceremony and tradition into the constitutional head of state for 16 nations and the symbolic leader of the Commonwealth. Yet for the 3 children watching, he remained fundamentally the same person who told them stories about his garden and taught them about the natural world during family visits. As the ceremony continued, the children witnessed their grandfather take the coronation oath, promising to govern with justice and mercy, to maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel. The weight of these promises was evident in the solemnity with which they were spoken and received. George found himself thinking about what it meant to make such promises in front of so many people, including his own family. The concept of duty and service that his parents had been teaching him took on new dimensions as he watched his grandfather formally accept these responsibilities. Charlotte was particularly struck by the moment when various religious leaders offered prayers for the new king, representing different faiths within the Commonwealth. The diversity of voices raised in blessing seemed to embody the modern monarchy's role in serving people of all backgrounds and beliefs. "Even God is listening today," she whispered, her observation carrying the kind of theological insight that often surprised adults who underestimated children's spiritual awareness. The ceremony continued with the presentation of various symbols of royal authority: the orb, the scepters, each one representing different aspects of the monarch's role. The children watched as their grandfather received each item with the gravity appropriate to its significance, understanding that these weren't merely ceremonial objects, but tangible representations of the responsibilities he was accepting. When the congregation was invited to pledge their allegiance to the new king, the children heard hundreds of voices speaking in unison, creating a moment of collective commitment that was both moving and slightly overwhelming in its power. "I will bear true allegiance to your majesty," the voices proclaimed, and George found himself mouthing the words along with the adults, understanding instinctively that he too was part of this moment of national unity. As the ceremony moved toward its climax, with the playing of "God Save the King" and the formal recognition of the new monarch by all present, the children experienced something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The moment when personal family relationships intersected with national history, when their beloved grandfather became a symbol of continuity and service for millions of people around the world. The transformation was complete, but the man remained fundamentally the same, and that paradox would shape their understanding of royal duty for years to come. The triumphant notes of "God Save the King" filled Westminster Abbey as the newly crowned King Charles III rose from the coronation chair, the weight of St. Edward's crown balanced perfectly upon his head. The moment marked not just the culmination of the ceremony, but the beginning of a new chapter in British history, one that his three grandchildren had witnessed from the very front row, their young faces reflecting the awe and pride that filled the ancient sacred space. As the processional began, the royal family prepared to follow their patriarch out of the abbey and into the waiting world beyond. The children had sat remarkably still throughout the lengthy ceremony, but now excitement began to bubble up as they realized they were about to become part of the grand spectacle that millions of people around the world were waiting to see. "Are we going to ride in the golden carriage?" Lewis asked with barely contained enthusiasm as they rose from their seats, his earlier solemnity giving way to the natural excitement of a 4-year-old who had been promised something magical. "The Golden State Coach is for the new king and Queen Camilla," William explained patiently, helping his youngest son straighten his formal jacket. "We'll have our own special carriage, and we'll all ride together through the streets so people can celebrate with us." The procession out of Westminster Abbey was a carefully choreographed affair, with each member of the royal family taking their designated place in the order of precedence that had been established over centuries of tradition. The Wales family found themselves positioned prominently in the sequence, acknowledging William's role as heir apparent and the children's place as the future of the monarchy. As they emerged from the abbey into the brilliant daylight, the roar of the crowd was almost overwhelming. Hundreds of thousands of people lined the streets of London, their cheers creating a wall of sound that seemed to reverberate off the buildings themselves. The sight was breathtaking, a sea of humanity stretching in every direction, united in celebration and marked by the red, white, and blue of countless flags. Charlotte instinctively reached for her mother's hand as they walked toward their waiting carriage, the sheer magnitude of the crowd both thrilling and slightly intimidating. "So many people are happy," she observed with the directness that had always characterized her observations about the world around her. "They are indeed," Catherine agreed, giving her daughter's hand a reassuring squeeze. "They're celebrating not just your grandfather becoming king, but what that means for our country and all the countries he now represents. It's a very joyful day for many, many people." George, walking beside his father with increasing confidence, found himself studying the crowd with the analytical mind that was developing as he grew older. He could see families who had clearly traveled long distances to be present, groups of friends wearing matching commemorative t-shirts, elderly people in wheelchairs who had been determined not to miss this historic moment, and children his own age and younger who were experiencing their first major royal celebration. "Papa," he said thoughtfully, "when it's your turn to be king, will this many people come?" The question caught William off guard with its casual acceptance of the future that awaited their family. I hope so, he replied honestly. But that won't happen for many, many years. For now, we celebrate Grandpapa and support him in his new role. Their carriage was indeed magnificent. Not quite as ornate as the Golden State coach that would carry the newly crowned king and queen consort, but still a beautiful example of royal craftsmanship that gleamed in the sunlight and drew appreciative gasps from the crowd as the family approached. Louis was particularly fascinated by the horses that would pull their carriage, magnificent animals whose coats had been groomed to perfection and whose ceremonial tacks sparkled with polished brass and leather. They're like fairy tale horses, he announced with delight, seemingly unaware that his observation was being captured by dozens of photographers positioned nearby. They are rather magical, Catherine agreed, lifting Louis to help him climb into the carriage while William assisted George and Charlotte. These horses have been trained specially for occasions like this. They're very brave and very well-behaved, even when there are lots of people cheering. As the family settled into the plush interior of the carriage, they could see the beginning of the ceremonial procession ahead of them. The Golden State coach was truly magnificent, its gilded surface catching the sunlight like something from a dream. Inside, they could see the silhouettes of the new king and queen consort, beginning their first journey as crowned monarchs through the streets of their capital city. There goes Grandpapa, George said with evident pride, waving toward the ornate coach even though he knew his grandfather couldn't see him through the formal windows. The procession began to move, and immediately the children understood why this moment was considered so special by so many people. The crowds pressed forward against the barriers, their enthusiasm palpable even from inside the carriage. Cameras flashed constantly, creating an almost strobe-like effect that added to the surreal nature of the experience. Remember what we practiced about waving, Catherine reminded them gently as they began to acknowledge the crowd's enthusiasm. Slow, gentle movements, and try to look at different groups of people so everyone feels included. The children took to their role with natural grace, each finding their own style of connecting with the massive audience that surrounded them. George waved with growing confidence, his natural leadership beginning to show as he helped guide his siblings' attention to different sections of the crowd. Charlotte's waves were accompanied by genuine smiles that seemed to delight the photographers, while Louis alternated between enthusiastic waving and pressing his nose to the carriage window in wonder at the spectacle surrounding them. As they traveled through the historic streets of London, passing landmarks that had witnessed centuries of royal processions, the children began to understand that they were not just passengers in this moment, but active participants in the creation of history. The photographs being taken, the videos being recorded, the memories being formed by the hundreds of thousands of people lining the streets. All of this would become part of the permanent record of the day their grandfather became king. Look, there's someone with a picture of Great-Granny, Charlotte observed, pointing to a woman in the crowd who was holding a framed photograph of the late Queen Elizabeth II alongside current commemorative materials. The sight touched them all deeply, serving as a reminder that this day was not just about celebrating the beginning of a new reign, but also about honoring the legacy of the remarkable woman who had served for 70 years before passing the crown to her son. She would have loved seeing you all here today, William said softly, his voice carrying the emotion that such moments always brought to the surface. She always said that the most important thing about any royal occasion was the family being together to support each other. As their carriage rounded the final turn toward Buckingham Palace, the children could see the massive crowd that had gathered in front of the royal residence. The iconic balcony, where so many historic royal moments had taken place, awaited them. The culmination of a day that had begun with 3 children getting dressed in their finest clothes and had evolved into something that would define not just this moment in history, but their understanding of their own roles in the ongoing story of the British royal family. The golden gates of Buckingham Palace opened before them, and the Wales family prepared for the final act of this historic day, the balcony appearance that would seal their grandfather's coronation in the memory of the nation and the world. 3 young royals who had begun the day as excited children were about to conclude it as witnesses to history, forever changed by their role in one of the most significant days in modern British history. The crowd's cheers grew even louder as they passed through the palace gates, and history prepared to welcome its newest chapter.